Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Let us start our second lecture from the definition of philosophy. Philosophy means love of wisdom, and philosophy in this sense is what men must acquire if the new powers invented by technicians and handed over by them to be wielded by ordinary men and women. Philosophy means love of wisdom. Philo mean love and Sophie mean wisdom. So it is the love of wisdom. Which wisdom? The wisdom that is to be employed, that is to be used when the tools that are invented by these technicians and these scientists, they are to be used by ordinary people, common people, when they use, how they are to use these weapons. So here there is great need of philosophy, or not to plunge mankind into an appalling cataclysm, appalling, threatening cataclysm, destruction. If we don't want humanity to go into destruction, horrible destruction, then first of all we should train common people, we should train common masses in the use of those deadly weapons, those tools which are made by scientists, which are made by technicians, how to use them. But the philosophy that should be a part of general education is not the same thing as the philosophy of specialists. So here Lord Russell says that there is two types of philosophy that he is discussing here. That one type of philosophy is for the education of common masses, for the education of common people, and the second type of philosophy is philosophy for specialists, for the learned people of that branch of knowledge. Not only in philosophy but in all branches of academic study, there is a distinction between what has the cultural value and what is only of professional interest. So these two things are kept in mind. One thing is cultural value. So in order to convey cultural values, cultural tradition to the common masses, there are simple terminologies, there is simple language, and this should be conveyed to the people in a very, very simple way. But as far as professional interests are concerned, when we go to that profession, we have to use special vocabulary, special terminology. So then we use those professional terms. So here Lord Russell divides this philosophy into two types. One type of philosophy is very easy, it is made easy for the common masses, and the other type of philosophy is very erudite philosophy, very philosophy that has specific terms, it is full of terms, and it is professional philosophy, it is philosophy for specialization. Now Lord Russell gives us some examples to describe his point of view, to explain his point of view. He says that historians may debate what happened to Sennacherib's unsuccessful expedition of 698 before Christ, but those who are not historians need not know the difference between it and his successful expedition 3 years earlier. So here Lord Russell says that if a person is historian, he will take a detailed survey of the life and achievements of King Sennacherib, who was the king of Assyria from 765 to 681 BC. So as it is natural that the kings take part in different battles. In some battles they win and they have to lose some battles. Same is the case with this king Sennacherib. He had to face defeat in 698 before Christ, but 3 years earlier he had participated some campaigns, some expeditions, and those expeditions 3 years earlier, in those expeditions he had been very successful. So Lord Russell says here that if a person want to know only superficial or on the surface knowledge of the king, he will not go into the detailed study of his life and his expedition and his way of ruling his subjects and all these things. But a historian will go into detail of his campaigns. He will see all the pros and cons of all of his campaigns. the positive points of his campaigns and the negative points of his campaigns. In the same way, only a few words or superficial information is sufficient for the common people who want only a know-how of some subjects or about some personality. But if a person wants specialization, he will go into detail. Now, Lord Russell gives us another example, and he says, professional Grecians may usefully discuss a disputed reading in a play of Aeschylus, but such matters are not for the man who wishes, in spite of a busy life, to acquire some knowledge of what the Greeks achieved. So if a common person wants to know the dramas, the tragedies, or comedies that were written by great tragedian, the old playwright of Greek, so he will acquire very superficial knowledge of the Greek drama. But if a person wants to analyze the plays of Aeschylus, he will have to go in detail of all the dramas of Aeschylus, and positive point of dramas of Aeschylus and negative point of the dramas written by Aeschylus. Similarly, the men who devote their lives to philosophy must consider questions that the general educated public does right to ignore. So in the same way, the people who want to get specialization in philosophy, they must probe into the questions, probe into the points that are ignored by common people. Common people don't take interest in these little or small issues, but if a person is getting specialization, he has to go into every bit of the information about the concerned subject. Such is the difference between the theory of universals in Aquinas and in Duns Scotus, or the characteristics that a language must have if it is to be able, without falling into nonsense, to say something about itself. So he says that in philosophy, something have been keenly observed by Aquinas, he was philosopher, Thomas Aquinas, and Duns Scotus, and he says that if a person want to know about the characteristics of language, he must know every bit of the characteristics of that language. Such questions belong to the technical aspects of philosophy, and their discussion cannot form part of its contribution to general culture. So the questions that are related to technical aspects of philosophy, they are technical. They are essential for the people who want to get specialization in philosophy, and general culture does not need these terminologies. In general public or general culture, philosophy is to be presented in the language of, in the words of common masses. Academic education should aim at giving as a corrective of the specialization which increase of knowledge has made unavoidable as much as time will permit, of what has cultural value in such studies as history, literature, and philosophy. So academic education, the education that is given to the people in formal education, Lord Russell says that cultural values should be imparted to the masses by setting a syllabus for them in history, in literature, and philosophy. So philosophy, history, and literature should be employed for the common people, to give them, to impart them their cultural values. It should be made easy for a young man who knows no Greek to acquire through translation some understanding, however inadequate, of what the Greeks accomplished. So through these translations, through translation of the great works of Greek, a common person who wants to know about the works of Greek, he should be given some information about it. Instead of studying the Anglo-Saxon kings over and over again at school, some attempts should be made to give a conspectus of world history. So instead of focusing only on one branch of knowledge, for example, he is saying that instead of focusing only on Anglo-Saxon period, we should have a detailed survey of the whole of the history, and we should have know-how about the whole of history, about the different eras and periods of history. So he says that instead of focusing only on Anglo-Saxon kings over and over again and again at school, some attempts should be made to give a conspectus means survey of world history, bringing the problems of our own day into relation with those of Egyptian priests. So he says that we should be aware of our present history, we should be aware of Egyptian priests, Babylonian kings, and Athenians reformers, as well as with all the hopes and despairs of the intervening centuries. Moreover, we should have the knowledge of all the centuries, intervening centuries, the centuries which are between our present era and the old era, and the intervening centuries, the centuries that are coming during these two periods, the old period and the new period. All those hopes and despairs of intervening centuries, but it is only a philosophy treated from a similar point of view that I wish to write. So he says that philosophy should be treated like this, that we should have a survey of philosophy, and we should apply philosophy in this form, in very simple form, to educate the masses, to change the behavior of the people, how to live in this world, how to use new science and technology according to the new challenges of these recent times. Philosophy has had from its earliest days two different objects which were believed to be closely interrelated. On the one hand, it aimed at a theoretical understanding of the structure of the world. On the other hand, it tried to discover and inculcate